Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. I talk about democracy, which has long been associated with liberalism, but democracy is not exactly what it used to be, and neither is liberalism. So, a piece here from the National Opinion Center of Canada. For a violence-free future, we need to address online hate speech. And it's written by someone called Maya Roy, who is the CEO of YWCA Canada, the nation's largest and oldest gender equity organization. YWCA Canada launched its Block Hate, Building Resilience Against Online Hate Speech project. And the YWCA, didn't that used to be called the Young Women's Christian Association? So what exactly is it today? Because apparently it seems to be an entirely political organization. Equity, which is not quite the same thing as equality. It begins with a quotation from Canadian Cabinet Minister Catherine McKenna. It needs to stop. She said this best last year when she described an incident of hate speech she experienced on the job. Unfortunately, hate speech, especially online, hasn't abated. It's worsened. Okay. First off, every politician gets nasty letters, gets threats. All of them. But we have been gaslighted to believe that this is a phenomenon which only affects women. Now, I suppose you could just look at Donald Trump, President of the United States, who is obviously, it seems to me, the most hated Western Democratic politician, certainly in modern history. People calling for his death, for him to be jailed, for his children to be jailed, for all sorts of nasty things to happen to his children and to his wife. But no, it's all about women. It's always about women. Now, for a violence-free future, what on earth is this woman on about? There's no such thing as a violence-free future because violence is inherent to humanity. Any attempt to eliminate violence completely or to eliminate hate speech or other internet unpleasantness is a totalitarian venture. And keep in mind, I don't see anywhere here a definition of what hate speech is. Catherine McKenna, who is a blonde woman in her, late 40s, very good-looking woman, I must say. When she was environment minister, she was mocked as Climate Barbie. And apparently this is hate speech because we're not allowed to make comments about the physical appearance of politicians, but of course we are allowed to make comments about the physical appearance of politicians, particularly if they are men. She continues, in fact, since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the United Nations, that august and universally respected organization, is reporting that online hate speech against Asian, Black, Indigenous, Jewish, Muslim, and other minority groups has grown significantly. In the wake of the global crisis, an AI startup found that hate speech on Twitter directed towards China and people of Chinese descent has increased by 900% since the end of March. And again, in the absence of definition, this is not really telling us much. Hate speech on Twitter directed towards China, references to the origin, perhaps, of COVID-19. We're not allowed to talk about that. But let's look at this laundry list here. Asian, Black, Indigenous, Jewish, Muslim, and other minority groups. What group is left out of this list? Why, that would be white people, wouldn't it? And online speech against white people is far more prevalent than against any of these other groups put together because white people are responsible for racism. They invented races. They racialized people. They're responsible for white supremacy and white nationalism. These terms are never defined, really, because they're meaningless. But all of the evil in the world, we are told, on a regular basis, is the responsibility of white people. Let's see, and many times online hate speech is gendered, targeting trans and cis women and non-binary people disproportionately. You notice how she threw cis women in there right after trans women? Because cis women, particularly those women who have been called TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, have been the subject of hate, not just hate speech, but actually hate acts. That's why for us at YWCA Canada, as we work towards eliminating gender-based violence, what about the other kind of violence that isn't gender-based? We see how critical it is to address online hate speech. It's an infringement of our human rights. Well, your human right not to be offended, where is that adumbrated? And we all have a role to play in stopping it. If left unchecked, this hatred will remain a corrosive force in our society, and we risk losing the incredible contributions and perspectives of so many communities. How? These groups, Asian, Black, Indigenous, Jewish, Muslims, are they particularly silent, shy these days? Doesn't seem like it. In my work with YWCA from coast to coast to coast, I've had many conversations with young people and non-binary people about the emotional toll online hate speech takes on them. They tell me about the challenges on their mental health, feeling socially isolated and also feeling scared to engage civically and in their community. This is not okay. Again, non-binary people, are they particularly shy these days? Young women on social media, particularly shy? It doesn't seem so. As more of us spend time online to adhere to physical distancing requirements, the civic square is now virtual, so we need our online spaces to be safer as we engage, debate, and share our thoughts and ideas. Well, much of what goes on in social media is not so much debating, engaging, and sharing thoughts and ideas. It's just insults. White people are bad, white people are stupid, white people are evil, white people are weak, white people suffer from fragility, etc., etc. And it's been noted, I suppose, for as long as Twitter has existed, that women, particularly young people, young women that is, have a amusing habit of, to put it crudely, flinging shit against people they don't like, particularly men, and then howling in terror when it is flung back at them. Online hate evolves as our platforms to connect and engage change. So how can we keep up? More importantly, are we capturing what online hate speech is in real time? For example, social media over the last 10 years has looked very different with the popularization of platforms like Instagram and TikTok. With new features and ways that people are abusing social media platforms, we also need to develop different means to address hate speech on Facebook, Twitter, and beyond. Well, with regard to Instagram and TikTok, these platforms are used primarily by women, particularly young people, to show off their bodies, to show off their clothes, to show off their makeup, to show off their hair, to just show how sexually attractive they are, or to boast about the expensive and interesting food and drink that they consume. As well as, oh yes, here's my new purse, here's my new shoes, etc., etc. And amusingly, the vast majority of the abuse that is directed at these women does not come from men, it comes from other women. Part of the challenge has been that the communities most affected have not been adequately engaged, boy, there's that word again, in not only identifying what hate speech looks like, but also how to counter the harms through the development of tools, policies, and organizational actions. In other words, rent-seeking. That's exactly what YWCA Canada hopes to address through our Block Hate, Building Resilience Against Online Hate Speech initiative, supported by Public Safety Canada. Oh, so the YWCA is astroturfing for the federal government of Canada. We can't do this work alone or in silos. We need everyone stepping up, from government to tech companies to organizations that work directly with the communities most affected. But how do we do this? From the work I've done and what I've seen on the ground, we need three components. First, we need coordinated action that understands the ongoing lived realities of people most affected by engaging, diverse communities. Next, we need to build community-led and validated tools that increases the capacity for all of us to act. Finally, we need to raise awareness about this issue and the tools we can use to stop it. This week, as the Canadian and global YWCA movement celebrates Week Without Violence, I urge all of you to think about how you can be part of stopping online hate. That's exactly what we need to create a violence-free future. What this boils down to pretty much is anything that you say that I disagree with constitutes hate. I mean, hurt feelings. Hurt feelings are not traditionally understood as hate, but today they are. Jim Kunstler has a piece today, I suppose, about the death of liberalism in the Democratic Party. He begins, I have some questions for former friends who have dumped me on account of my support for Trump's re-election, which is mostly a vote to prevent the Democratic Party and its fellow travelers from running the government. On the whole, these former friends are college-educated, mature in experience, and cultured. Some of them are well acquainted with history, which is to say, they ought to know better than to support the obviously illiberal motives of the political left. Are you against the principle of free speech? The Democratic Party is. They used to be champions of the First Amendment. Now they want to make it conditional on ideas and sentiments they support. Contrary ideas are to be labeled hate speech and suppressed, along with anything that might hurt somebody's feelings. How did you come to such a complete misunderstanding of what free speech means? Namely, that a free society is obliged to tolerate the expression of disagreeable ideas up to the limit, as the Supreme Court put it, of crying fire in a crowded theater. I will answer my own question partially by saying you've been programmed against free speech by what used to be the very vehicles of it, the newspapers and TV channels, which have amazingly come out against freedom of the press and turned into propaganda outlets for woke progressivism and its illiberal agenda, thereby inadvertently committing suicide of the entire profession. We've seen this acted out most vividly just in the past week in the social media companies' efforts to suppress all news of the Biden family's global business operations, along with the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, NPR, and other leading news organizations that Americans used to depend on to know what was happening in the nation. This is especially unforgivable during a national election. Did you support the movement on campus in recent years to shut down events featuring speakers such as Charles Murray of the Bell Curve, Heather McDonald of City Journal, Dinesh D'Souza, and many others who represented not so woke ideas that offended you? Since when are your feelings so special that they negate the open exchange of ideas in the places that used to be dedicated to it, the universities? Should higher education only entertain ideas that you and your cohorts approve of? What if, in some future, a different cohort gains control of higher education and seeks to exclude your ideas on the grounds that they're offensive, i.e., they just don't like them? Are you in favor of a politicized Department of Justice and CIA? This is what the Democratic Party's Resistance League deliberately brought about during the 2016 election, and they continue to promote it. Is it okay for bureaucrats to break the law to disable their political adversaries? That was the essence of the Russiagate ruse. Former employees of those agencies, such as ex-CIA Chief John Brennan and Andrew Weissman, who ran the Mueller investigation, to this day still hype Russian collusion falsehoods to deflect attention from their own misdeeds. You let them get away with that. Is it okay for these government agencies to spy on U.S. citizens without any legal predicate, except they're being political adversaries? Would it be okay if that were used against you in some future disposition of things? Is it okay for the FBI to withhold exculpatory evidence in federal court proceedings, thereby obstructing justice? Is it okay for the FBI and CIA to leak falsehoods to news reporters for political advantage? Do you not understand how by failing to oppose these actions, you undermine the basis of political rectitude in a republic, bearing in mind the literal meaning of the word republic from the Latin res publica, the public thing where civilization lives? Are you against reason itself? For all your talk about the primacy of science, your agenda militates furiously against it. Math is racist. There's no biological basis for understanding sex. All science is a white colonial way of knowing. Masculinity is toxic. Women can have penises and men can menstruate. Do you really believe these absurd fantasies manufactured in the graduate schools in the service of academic careerism at all costs? Or just go along with them for the sake of protecting your own careers and perquisites? Are you in favor of Antifa riots and the BLM hustle? They are staunchly supported by elected Democratic mayors and governors. These organizations looted and burned down shopping districts in many cities, and Democratic leaders did nothing to stop them. In Portland, Oregon, the nightly riots have continued for over 120 days under Mayor Ted Wheeler and Governor Kate Brown. The nightly riots have ceased to have any genuine political purpose or meaning. Rather, they've degenerated into a party space for energetic young people who can't otherwise go to clubs, parties, concerts, cafes, or raves during the COVID-19 shutdown. So rather, they're enjoying a long-running game of cops and robbers out in the streets, busting things up, setting fires, getting chased around, and waking people up in their homes late at night with bullhorns and heavy metal music. They're obviously having fun. The police have been forbidden to effectively disperse them, and the Multnomah County DA refuses to prosecute any of them, all of which just inspires the Antifas and BLMs to keep the game going. They have no real stake in the public interest. The net effect is terrible destruction of the city as a functioning civic organism. The Democratic Party has made it all impossible. Wait until it comes to your town or city. Are you in favor of cancel culture? The Democratic Party is addicted to it. Should livelihoods and reputations be destroyed for expressing opinion or telling a joke? Is asking someone for a date in the office a fireable offense? Were Christine Blasey Ford and Michael Avenatti unimpeachable witnesses during the Brett Kavanaugh SCOTUS hearings? Or was that just an instance of anything goes and nothing matters? How much sadistic pleasure do you suppose has been involved in the professional ruination of men in the media, the arts, and politics? How much of cancel culture and the Me Too movement have been based on simple coercion, the wish to push other people around, and on vengeance for personal losses and slights? By the way, did you notice that Jeffrey Toobin has not been fired from his positions at the New Yorker magazine and CNN for jerking off on screen during a Zoom meeting of his professional colleagues last week? None of them have even publicly criticized him. Why do you suppose that is? I suppose it's because he is a favored member of the Woke Journalist Club and enjoys special protection from professional ruin, though the truth is he's thrown away his credibility as a legal commentator, whether the wokerati like it or not, especially on matters of public conduct. But that's just one example of the hypocrisy that wokesterism is full of and reveals its chronic, disingenuous insincerity. The Democratic Party supports all this pernicious mendacity and bad faith and more. Joe Biden is the current figurehead of the party. Biden pretty clearly has insurmountable defects of his own, first as an international grifter while holding national office, as well as the misfortune of his cognitive decline, which is not his fault, but disqualifies him for high office. As for everybody else in the party, I don't want such a reliably dishonest gang to be in charge of running the American government. So I'm voting for Trump. He's far from my idea of an ideal candidate, but despite his defects, he's managed to hold the country together during the greatest disruption of normal life since World War II. I've also come to admire his resilience and, yes, his bravery in the face of an opposition that has spared no effort of foul play to destroy him. I'm under no illusions that Donald Trump will make America great again in the way that many of his supporters understand that slogan. The USA is headed into a terrible ordeal of economic disorder that I call the long emergency. Trump won't stop it, and it may yet make a fool out of him. But the Democratic Party's agenda would add an extra layer of tyrannical and sadistic insanity to the process that will only bring more suffering to more people, and I don't want that to happen. I believe that Trump will probably win the election, but we'll have to see what kind of nefarious dodges his opponents will employ to prevent any resolution of that outcome. Let's take a look at the chat. Tricky Woo, hey, Mr. Grace, hello, hello. Talk about the banning of non-essential items in the UK, says Chogokin666. That's about the most absurd COVID restriction as of yet, in my opinion. Yes, apparently books have been banned. You can't sell books in Wales anymore. Look, it's just doing something for the sake of doing something. Oh, we have essential jobs and non-essential jobs. According to whom? Well, I mean, people have to be punished. That's what it comes down to. If you can go into a Tesco or whatever and buy all this stuff, well, you know, where's the panic? Where's the emergency? Chogokin666 says, what is the etymology of cis? It's one of these things that is so stupid that I've looked this up. It's been explained to me many, many times. Again, it's just so grossly stupid that I forgot. But let's go to Wikipedia. Cisgender, sometimes cissexual, often abbreviated to merely cis, is a term for people whose gender identity matches their sex assigned at birth. Yeah, assigned at birth. Boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. It's completely arbitrary. Who knows how that happens? For example, someone who identifies as a woman was assigned female at birth as a cisgender woman. The term cisgender is the opposite of the word transgender. German sexologist Volkmar Zigusch used the neologism cissexual or cissexuell in German in a peer-reviewed publication in a 1998 essay, The Neosexual Revolution. He cites his two-part article, Die Transsexuellen und unser nosomorpher Blick, Transsexuals and Our Nosomorphic View, as the origin of the term. Cisgender has its origin in the Latin-derived prefix cis, meaning on this side of, which is the opposite of trans, meaning across from or on the other side of. This usage can be seen in the cis-trans distinction in chemistry, the cis-trans or complementation test in genetics, in cis-Caucasia, from the Russian perspective, in the ancient Roman term Cisalpine Gaul, that's Gaul on the other side of the Alps, cis-K and trans-K, separated by the K River, and more recently Cisjordan, as opposed to Transjordan. So there you go. Okay. Have you yet been able to access your Canadian Gibbs? Says Buddy, no, I have not. Because something, 60, 70, 75% of Canadian civil servants, they haven't gone back to the office. They haven't gone back to the office. Contra coup, yes, yes, on the side of. Head McNick, the phrase, I don't feel safe, has more from a statement of concern to a direct threat of legitimate violence. William Hicks, good evening. Interesting title. What kind of liberalism? Enlightenment, classical, or the left-wing kind that Rush Limbaugh talks about? Well, liberalism is left-wing, isn't it? Is it not? I mean, that's the world we live in. It's the world that we've lived in since the Enlightenment. It's supposed to be about science and free inquiry and, you know, the rejection of hypotheses that cannot be falsified, as Karl Popper put it. But no, we just come up with something like assigned at birth. Yes, everyone believes that. You'd have to be a horrible person not to believe in the concept of assigned at birth. Again, are we supposed to believe this is completely arbitrary? I guess everything is arbitrary now. Walrus Libertarian says people are trying to hold these people to a standard and they really don't give a shit. Yeah. No, liberalism is dead. We live in a post-liberal era. As Kunstler points out, the wokesters, they don't understand the implications of this. They really don't have a clue that this could be used against them. if we have a public square and there's certain rules, well, there's certain protections associated with this. If the public square is shut down, then I don't know, we go back to earlier ways of order. I don't know, perhaps Mao Zedong's famous formulation that all power flows from the barrel of a gun. David Wright says, Künstler means artist in German. Indeed, it does. A beautiful word. I see James has done quite a few paintings. Walrus the Libertarian says, all this gender identity stuff started with the internet where you can pretend to be whatever you want. Well, actually, when did this happen? Starting in the 1970s, that the word sex was replaced with gender because it sounds fancier. Philip Daniel says, I knew a woke white chick that used to say white people invented binary sex during colonialism to justify atrocities against non-white people. Well, there's lots of places in Africa where homosexuality is still illegal and dangerous. They seem to recognize it there. Jonathan Ferguson says they're confirming Amy Coney Barrett tonight, which is good news. Fran says, where's Alex DeLarge and is he still betting on Biden? Noob says, why is liberalism dead? Explain, please. Well, it's it died of lack of oxygen or lack of concern. Again, let's say, I'll say the 1960s. Okay, these trends have existed for longer than the 1960s. But what we saw in the West in the 1960s was universities being overrun by students. They were overrun because the university administrations made no attempt to defend them. So the students say, we demand a Black Studies department. We demand a Women's Studies department. Oh, well, we'll have to give you that because we're a timorous people. As I mentioned before, I think that the university administrators were too clever by half because they thought, okay, we'll have Black studies, we'll have women's studies, we'll have gay studies, we'll have intersectional studies, but we can rope off this stupidity from real scholarship. No, that didn't happen because they invaded everything to the point now where, as Künstler points out, math is racist and all scholarship is in the service of white colonialism. Okay, let's move on here. Talk about Twitter, which is it's the new electoral college, right? It's Twitter that's going to tell us who wins the presidential election, which is in 8 days. This is from Tyler Durden at Zero Hedge. Twitter is pulling out all the stops with just 7 days left till the 2020 election. I guess they're counting it differently. As if a complete and total cover-up of the Hunter Biden story by the mainstream media and big tech wasn't far enough. And as if every social media product and app you use annoyingly reminding you to vote on November 3rd wasn't enough, Twitter has apparently gone full Orwell and through a spokesperson basically said they will prompt users with warnings on topics that are likely to be the subject of election misinformation. The news hit Bloomberg at around 12:30 p.m. EST on Monday. Twitter will begin to show prompts to U.S. users that address topics that are likely to be the subject of election misinformation. This is from a Twitter spokesperson. What are topics that are likely to be the subject of election misinformation anyway? Well, we're guessing it can include literally anything that would be detrimental to Democratic nominee Joe Biden, while negative press and conspiracies about President Trump are allowed to run amok at will. For example, we pointed out the recent hypocrisy of Twitter allowing Rudy Giuliani's alleged sexually explicit scene in the new Borat movie to run wild on Twitter, while video of a presidential nominee's son allegedly smoking crack while engaging in sex acts with a woman was promptly pulled from the platform. Around the same time, Twitter support put up a tweet calling the 2020 election unlike any other in U.S. history and informing users is going to prompt them about potentially delayed election results and voting by mail. Speaking of potentially delayed election results, There was a provincial election here in British Columbia over the weekend, and the Liberal Party got hammered. But what are the results? Nobody knows. Why does nobody know? Because there's something like 500,000 mail-in ballots, and they are not going to start counting them, I believe, for about a week. And you know my rule, that the longer it takes from election day to which a result is certified, the greater the likelihood of fraud. We have a situation in the United States where I'll get ahead of this right now. There were extraordinary rumors going around this morning that Hunter Biden had died of a drug overdose, or alternatively, or perhaps at the same time, Joe Biden had had a stroke. Now, Election Day is Election Day for a reason, because the campaign ends when it ends. If you've seen any footage of Joe Biden in the last few weeks, he is coming to pieces. He is devolving at an astonishing rate, boasting about how his campaign has set up the greatest election fraud campaign in history. Yep, he actually said that. And not being able to remember Donald Trump's name, and he kept saying George. And then his wife, Dr. Jill, had to hiss at him, sotto voce, Trump. Yeah. So maybe, it would be in the interest of the United States of America for the voters to discover, whether Joe Biden is going to stroke out or die, or just do something so outrageous that it become too embarrassing for so many people to vote for him. Twitter. Okay, so Twitter is going to be telling us, no, this is what's what about this. Okay? And they're a publisher. They are a publisher. And what does that mean? Well, it means if they're a publisher, they're not a platform. And if they're not a platform and are instead a publisher, it means they are not entitled to the protections of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. I'm a little surprised that they have gone to such lengths, because how can they seriously deny that they are not, in fact, a publisher? Sean Davis of The Federalist tweeted this today. Twitter's banning everyone from retweeting this from the head of Judicial Watch. 100 million ballots and ballot applications set to flood mails and dramatically increase opportunities for voter fraud and election day chaos. So big tech to help the left and Joe Biden is censoring voter fraud info and how the left is setting up their steal. Yes, some or all of the content shared in this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about how to participate in an election or another civic process. Learn more. That's from Twitter itself. Disputed. If you're going to put a warning label on everything that appears on Twitter that is disputed, there's going to be very little left that is not fitted with a warning. A simple statement that chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream is obviously a disputed. It's a disputed claim. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News, and there's a picture of TikTokers, and there's one in the middle who has made herself out to look, well, most of them, they look like demons. A new TikTok trend has emerged in which leftists playfully threaten to kneecap anyone who doesn't support Black Lives Matter. Clips uploaded to the Chinese-owned website show users, most of them young women, displaying alphabet people colors, dancing while miming to the words, "If you don't support Black Lives Matter, I'll break your Nico kneecaps." Nico is the Japanese word for cat, which is also used to describe characters in anime or manga that have cat-like features. As we previously highlighted, under the TikTok viral trend that emerged last month, featured parents and older siblings throwing their babies off camera to the tune of a hip-hop song about abortion before twerking. In general, TikTok serves as a hub for young girls, some of them underage, to perform sexually suggestive dances to whatever happens to be the latest degenerate hip-hop song. The platform, which is owned by Chinese company ByteDance, was the target of an attempted ban by President Trump back in August, citing the app's threat to U.S. national security, but the executive order was blocked by a federal judge. Hate speech, violence on the internet, which I was talking about at the top of the show. Well, I guess it comes down to who is doing it, doesn't it? Whom, as always. Black Lives Matter, of course, is an organization which was concentrated in the inner city, you call it, but now it's moving out to the suburbs. This is from Lana Shedwick at Breitbart. Black Lives Matter invaded Lake Oswego, Oregon on Sunday and demanded allegiance from suburban shoppers and diners who were on the streets. It looks like a lovely place, actually. The city of approximately 40,000 is situated 8 miles south of Portland. It surrounds the 405-acre Oswego Lake. The community is one of the wealthiest suburbs surrounding the Portland area. Breitbart News reported that Moms United for Black Lives promised to fuck shit up in Lake Oswego on Sunday. That sounds like conspiracy to me. Doesn't that sound like conspiracy to commit violence to you? One business, a pub on A Street, said it was going to board up its building to protect itself from vandalism. The Oregonian reported that one of the leaders, Demetria Hester, said the march was about showing Lake Oswego residents that Black Lives Matter all the time and about making racists uncomfortable. Danielle James is also leader of the group, and they've got some kind of frontline drum thing going. Kitty Shackelford tweeted, Portland protest losers harassing everybody they see walking down the street and the people trying to enjoy a sundae at any of the local restaurants nearby. I don't think they get how absolutely pathetic this looks. One of the Moms United for Black Lives carried a bullhorn and yelled at one man who was walking by, "Excuse me, sir, are you anti-racists? Can I get a Black Lives Matter?" He kept walking, but it sounded like he answered yes. She asked someone else, "How about you? Do Black Lives Matter?" She then turned her sights on a woman sitting alone at a restaurant table in the corner. The protesters surrounded the woman and mocked her as she recorded them with her phone. One of them said, "Damn, she's super anxious." They asked her name and added, "Does your kid go to LO High? Do your kids go to LO High? Do they go to LO High? Are they judgmental like you?" They continued. They ridiculed the clearly uncomfortable woman, saying, "Look at how miserable you look. Look at how miserable she looks." The woman sat there filming but never said a word. The same protester kept repeating, "Do you teach them to be racist too? Do you teach your kids to be racist?" She added, "Or do they try to teach you not to be an effing racist, and yet you're still here being effing racist, right? Do Black Lives Matter to you?" Then they asked, "Do you have nothing to say? Nothing at all?" They all chimed in. One of them continued, "Oh, my effing flash guys, like, oh my God, like I'm so miserable right now." One of them mocked. One of the women who stood right in front of her table and mocked her was white. How do they think that this is going to have a happy ending? I can just see this getting very, very ugly, very, very fast. And of course, so much is going to depend on what happens on November the 3rd. I think that if Trump wins, and I do believe he will win, we're going to see the authorities coming down on these people like the wolf on the fold. So, I guess rather central to liberal society is the idea that everyone is held responsible for their actions, and that people are not immune to this because of various, I don't know, class or racial or religious markers. This is from Virginia Hale at Breitbart. Britain's national inquiry into child sex abuse has been blasted for cowardice over race as it refused to look at grooming gang scandals carried out by mostly Pakistani gangs or to hear from key witnesses. Victims of the grooming gangs and their advocates blasted the public probe, which was launched in 2015. That was 5 years ago, and has so far cost taxpayers £143 million. It's just more rent-seeking. After emerged, it would not be examining any of the notorious cases in which Asian gangs have preyed on thousands of mostly white working-class girls. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse in England and Wales has so far looked at organizations like the Church of England and the Armed Forces to investigate what went wrong and why with regards to institutional failure to protect children from abuse. It was believed that the organized network section of the inquiry would look at the mostly Pakistani grooming gangs which have struck in towns across Britain, including Rotherham, Rochdale, Oxford, and Telford, while police, social services, and local councils turned a blind eye to the sexual abuse. In 2 weeks of hearings for this investigation, which took place from late September, the IICSA chose not to hear from grooming gang crime experts, victims of the phenomenon, or their advocates like whistleblower and former Greater Manchester Police Detective Maggie Oliver. Instead, the probe looked at 6 areas of England and Wales: Bristol, Durham, St Helens, Swansea, Tower Hamlets, and Warwickshire, because they represent a range of sizes, demographics, and institutional practices according to the Times. None of these regions has seen a major prosecution involving South Asian grooming gangs, noted the newspaper, reporting that the proportion of the population from Pakistani backgrounds in these areas is lower than the average in England and Wales. Yes, remember Thomas Fleming pointing out, well, it must be a couple of decades ago now, that we've seen a return to the status justice of the Middle Ages. That people are judged, based on their status. And some people have higher status than others. And obviously, the Pakistani community in England has a very high status indeed, because it's most important of all not to embarrass them, really, because that would be white supremacist, I guess. Ask yourself this: how can England be a white supremacist country when Asian grooming gangs, for a period of about 2 decades, rape, turn out thousands of white adolescent girls, and the politicians cover up for them? Does that seem like white supremacy to you? Let's go to J5 Killer. Let's see what he has to say. Meredith McGraw had tweeted, yet another printed paper left in our seats abroad, AF1, this time a tweet about polling in Philly. Some concerns for Biden in Pennsylvania polling, including in Philly, where he's running 10 points behind Hillary Clinton's support in 2016, and Trump is 9 points ahead of where he was 4 years ago. Josh Marshall, who was embarrassed, not quite up to Tubin standards, where he had various things going on in his computer a couple of years ago. And around midnight, he sent out a link, some political comment. The attached link was a lesbian porno. But Josh Marshall tweets, yes, if voters give them the votes, Democrats must use the power to build better institutions and strengthen democracy. We're at a crossroads. Not doing so means being a junior partner in Republican corruption. Again, always with the projection. If the polls were right last time, why were you crying so hard? Channing Datum says, why are you, some random no blue check guy on Twitter, able to perform analysis of this election cycle that is far superior to any verified hack with 200,000 followers? And J5 Killer responds, my short answer is that people who go into journalism tend to be lackwit apparatchiks and conformists. They're toadies and turds. tons of untapped talent on the right. These are HVAC guys here who are better writers and better at analyzing politics than Howard Feynman. No joke. Not even joking. A person I followed in 2016 was an HVAC guy who had a unique take on American politics. He was smarter and more observant than Norman Ornstein or Ron Brownstein. He knew Trump would win and why. Well, those two couldn't find their asses with both hands and a flashlight. He retweeted E.H. Loney. Look, if an overweight 74-year-old workaholic can recover fully in 4 days, that'd be Trump from COVID-19. I think the kids can go to school. Harry Enton had tweeted, at this moment, every single national poll would have to be wrong for Trump to win. Possible? Sure. Would I bet on it? No, I'm not an idiot. And, well, yeah, as people have pointed out, if Trump wins, it's over for the polling business. They're finished. The Hanging Chads tweeted, the pollsters rationalized 2016 so much to keep the cash flow going that they all spiraled themselves in a corner where they had to constantly affirm other pollsters. They couldn't admit flaws, so they had to double down with the same methods, mistaking precision for accuracy. We know that pollsters do this, that they take their sampling and they apply their methodology, and wow, this is an outlier here. This is not saying what the other pollsters are saying. So what they do is they adjust it to make their predictions closer to what everyone else is saying. Now that suggests to me that they are not too confident in their methodology. Okay, so let's move on to, let's actually go back to the chat before I move into the total, it's a freak show, the nightmare, which is the Biden family. Moms United, Philip Daniel, 9/10 are exclusively pet moms. Yeah, you remember when you woke up and you had people talking about them being pet moms, and you thought, what does that mean? Because everyone knows when you're talking about a mother, you're talking about a mother of children, right? But no, pet moms and pit mommies. Yes, Donald Robertson says he looks so frail that he would be liable to melt. Yeah, it's not just the speech. Just look at his eyes. Look at his eyes. He just, it just terror there. Absolute torment. Anron says, I think a number of musicians have had synesthesia. Okay. Scriabin, yes. So David Hevel points him out. Scriabin, he was a strange fellow, very much into the occult. Andrew B, is that any different from analyzing something from a feminist lens, which has been happening since the 1970s? I don't, again, feminist lens, what does that mean? Actually, I know what it means in practice. It means that certain organizations like the YWCA get money from government. That's what it means. It is astroturfing. That, there's certain organizations, health organizations, you know, like the American Lung Organization and the American Cancer Society. And they get money from government. And what do they do in exchange? They advocate for policies that the governments want. Scholarship was invaded by parasites, said Andrew B. A large part of this has to do with scale. There's simply too many people attending college and university. Most of these people would be far better off given training, technical training. There's an overproduction of elites. That these people who famously, with their $80,000 student debt, working as baristas at Starbucks, they've been sold a bill of goods. So they think that they're going to be part of the elite. But there's not all that many elite spots open. And as our societies become more oligarchical, Even if you have the talent, the intelligence, you're not going to be up for the jobs because they're going to go to family members. There's too much money sloshing through the systems, and it encourages this novelty. You see what happened? You see a similar thing in the art world. Every so often you hear about some Rembrandt selling for $150 million or whatever. Well, all of the good art has been sold. It's been found and sold. So what do you get? You get the bad art instead. You get My Messy Bed and a severed shark and a tank of formaldehyde or whatever, because apparently art needs to be created, and it's not going to be good, but it doesn't matter. It's just it's just a consumer good. I remember when I started going to the University of British Columbia in 1973, there were 25,000 undergraduates there and 5,000 graduate students, and it hit me right away that, if I disappeared, no one would notice. Practically anyone there could simply disappear. There's so many people. Well, UBC has more than twice as many students as that now. So, I don't know, you have people, I suppose there's still scholarship which goes on in universities, but when you have that many people, the fact that thousands and thousands of them are simply wasting their time or poisoning their minds, well, who notices? Who notices as long as people are getting paid? Okay. Let's see, people saying terrible things about Joe Biden. Spiritual Mamser says, I agree, KMG, the overproduction is the problem. Result in elites looking for their own ranks instead of trying to find support in the rest of society. Yeah, I would say that it seems reasonable to me. Take the top 5% of students and pay the full freight for them. But you see, in a scale society, that's going to lead to things like cheating, organized cheating, which we see in high schools, in universities, and this organized cheating is typically associated, let's say, with a certain foreign group. And you're also going to get the phenomenon of the only people at university being nose to the grindstone types who don't have any kind of life outside of, getting 99% on exams, which is not healthy for universities either. Okay, so let's head right into the nightmare here. Again, as I say, which is the Biden campaign. This is from Vox Day. This one is more credible than the norm simply because it comes from the same source that first reported Jeffrey Epstein's death. This does not mean it is true, of course. Don't ask me how I know, but Hunter Biden died of a crack overdose some 20 minutes ago. Joe is already on his way to the hospital. If true, it might serve to explain a rather less credible rumor. Biden halted his campaign today, not rumor, and rumor has it that he had a stroke that was followed by a larger stroke and death. I did not say that, call it bunk, but that's the rumor going around right now. It is somewhat safe to say that he had at least a minor stroke. If Biden is indeed dead, he'll be kept alive until after the election. At approximately the exact same time, Biden's campaign got suspended. All the Biden drops stopped. So there are also rumors that a deal was made, but I would not bet on it. I'm betting on two things. The first, that they got locked out of their servers, and the second, that they are in custody, under arrest, or dead. There's absolutely no proof of anything right now. Excuse me. Yeah, just astonishing stories that were reported over the weekend that seem to be backstopped by evidence, emails, diary pages, and the like, and I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it's like we're coming to the end of something. This trend, it's really got to the end, hasn't it? Okay, this is some news which broke not that long ago, and it's from Charlie Spearing at Breitbart, and there's an amusing picture of Joe Biden who appears to have dropped his mask on a stage and is bent over, a very uncomfortable situation, and he's picking up his mask. That's not good mask safety, is it? President Trump appeared to have smoked former Veep Joe Biden out of his basement after he mocked his opponent for having waved a white flag while speaking with reporters in Pennsylvania on Monday. The president spoke briefly to reporters after arriving in Pennsylvania at 10:53 a.m. on Monday morning for 3 campaign rallies in the state. He's waved a white flag on life, Trump replied when asked for his reaction to Biden's accusation that the president had waved the white flag on fighting the coronavirus pandemic. He doesn't leave his basement, Trump continued. This guy doesn't leave his basement. He's a pathetic candidate, I will tell you that. About an hour after the president's comments, the Biden campaign broke the lid on in-person events to announce a local stop in his hometown of Wilmington, Delaware. If Joe Biden has any doubt that he is not going to win the state of Delaware, then he's finished. And he knows he's finished. Why would he be campaigning in Delaware at all? Of all of 50 states, that would be the one that was tightest locked down. Biden only held 3 campaign events last week. On Sunday, October 18th, he held a drive-in rally in North Carolina, and on Saturday, he participated in 2 events in Pennsylvania. He did not hold any events on Sunday, while President Trump traveled from Florida to North Carolina to New Hampshire to Maine and back to Washington, D.C. that day. I don't know. There's something going on, Trump said in New Hampshire. Somebody said it's strategy. It's not really. Strategy would be coming out. Again, ask yourself this question. How is it possible that the Democratic candidate for president has essentially not campaigned? If you look at how other presidential candidates have campaigned since the modern, campaign process began, where they're supposed to be out and about, talking to supporters, holding rallies, Biden, it just stopped. So a week before the election, a little more than a week before the election, he announces he's not going to have any more live campaign events. Now, one would think that the media, even our media, would say, how badly off is this fellow? How feeble is he? Or is he, as Trump suggested, thrown in the towel on the campaign, that he knows that he can't win, so he's not going to expend any excess energy? But no, media doesn't talk about this because there's no story there. There's some funny ads coming out of the Trump campaign making fun of Joe Biden's infirmity. This is from Steve Watson at Summit News. Viewers of Fear the Walking Dead on AMC were treated to a Trump campaign ad Sunday, notifying them of how to prevent a zombie entering the White House. The ad featured several clips of Biden acting weirdly with a voiceover notifying viewers of the traits exhibited by the Walking Dead. Look for someone with a corpse-like appearance, exhibits aggressive behavior, craves human flesh, and utters incoherent moans and groans, the voiceover noted, while footage of Biden doing all of the above played in the background. With your help, we can prevent the zombie uprising, the short ad continued. And the slogan, only you can keep a zombie out of the White House. Given that Biden's endless stumbling around and brain failure, including the fact that he can't remember who he's running against, it was a shrewd move on behalf of the Trump war room. Funny stuff. Celebrities. What do celebrities have to say? Celebrities love Dr. Jill Biden. A slew of Hollywood pop stars, this is from David Eng at Breitbart, including Pink, John Legend, and Dave Matthews, performed in an online concert Sunday to rouse support for the Biden-Harris campaign. They were joined by a bevy of left-wing celebrities, including Helen Mirren, Armie Hammer, Whoopi Goldberg, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Amy Schumer. Joe will keep us safe. That's all we need to know, Cher sang at the end of the concert which also raised money for the Biden Victory Fund. Cher can't possibly believe this, can she? That Joe Biden will keep Americans safe. Again, I'll make the same joke because it doesn't stop being relevant or funny. On Inauguration Day, is Joe Biden going to order COVID-19 out of America by sundown? Joe Biden put in a brief appearance during the virtual event, answering softball questions from hosts George Lopez and CNN's Ana Navarro. Joe Biden said Latinos will have a seat at the table. Biden administration. Yeah, 20% of the population. I guess they'd have a seat at the table. It doesn't sound like they respect Latinos very much. At one point, Joe Biden confused Trump with one of the George Bushes. Kamala Harris recorded a brief video segment in which she urged voters to make a choice that will return decency, dignity, and integrity to the White House. And then she shook her ass. Well, she probably did. I didn't see it. Helen Mirren noted she's the first-time voter after becoming a U.S. citizen a few years ago. The British actress encouraged first-time and infrequent voters to cast their ballot. Whoopi Goldberg, I have no interest in Whoopi Goldberg, has to say Armie Hammer. Given that Armie Hammer has been, hammered in the media for the last 2 months for his numerous adulteries and his wife's aggrieved reaction to this, why would they be trotting that guy out? Pop star Pink said in a pre-recorded message that we are this close to electing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and setting a new course for our country. We need decent, compassionate, and committed leadership in the White House. I don't think that I'm the only person who finds this Pink woman scary. She looks like she goes out on the street beating people up. This is from the Daily Mail. Do you mean me, Joe? Trump puts the boot in after Joe Biden has to whisper his name under a breath when Joe tells virtual rally, we need to stop 4 more years of George. No, it's too funny. Everyone makes these kind of mistakes. I make those kind of mistakes on this live stream, but I don't do them again and again and again and again. Also, I'm old and somewhat decrepit, but I literally don't look like, my jaw is going to fall off. It's, and I'm looking at this picture. It's a screen cap. And there is a Jill, and she's got her typical Jill face on, like that. And Joe looking demented. And there's a signer who just looks absolutely furious. This is a black woman with glasses, and she looks like she's describing some sort of physical attack. Why do we need these sign people? We have closed captioning. Of course, everybody knows that. But I guess, is that their livelihood? Do they make a living doing this? Is it a good living? Or is it just, an opportunity to be seen in public? This is from Stephen Nelson at the New York Post. President Trump on Monday said Senator Kamala Harris' frequent bursts of laughter at serious questions suggest there's something wrong with the Democratic vice presidential candidate. Did you see Joe Biden's performance on that show? The only thing almost as bad was Kamala with the laugh. Ha ha, that's so funny. Ha ha ha. She kept laughing. I said, is there something wrong with her too? She will not be the first woman president. You can't let that happen. I said, is there something wrong with her? She kept laughing at very, serious questions. You remember the, Yas Slay Queen? Remember that? We got that with Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. Kamala Harris is seriously invested in this, far more than Hillary Clinton was. Kamala Harris wants to be the first cool wine aunt vice president. That seems to be the effect that she's going for. I don't know. People actually like that. The hip mom. She's actually not a mother, but never mind that. She could be. She's a pet mommy. From Lee Brown in the New York Post. The Post's exposés on Hunter Biden appear to have sparked a rush of early voters seeing if they can change their minds, with New York one of a handful of states giving some that unexpected right. No, just don't let them vote before Election Day. Then that wouldn't be a problem. More than 58.5 million have already cast their ballots, and searches for "Can I change my vote?" started trending over the last few days, linked to searches for Hunter Biden, according to Google Trends data. The biggest interest has come from Arizona, Tennessee, and Virginia, all states that, like most of the U.S., only give residents one shot at the polls, because that's all you need. But in some states, you can submit your ballot, have a change of heart, and submit a new ballot. No, I don't see any potential for fraud there. Do you? This is from Matthew Weil, direction of the election project at the Bipartisan Policy Center. That includes New York. At least for those who mailed in an absentee ballot, the election law recognized that plans change. Even if you request or cast and return an absentee ballot, you may still go to the polls and vote in person. And then what happens to the ballot that you sent in? How do we know that that ballot is going to be destroyed? But those who voted early in person do not get the same second chance. Once you've voted in a machine, that's it. The Board of Elections spokesperson told the Post, "You cast one vote, and that is complete." Again, exactly as it should be. From Ebony Bowden at the Post, President Trump has upgraded his signature act, rolling out enormous jumbotrons at his rallies to play videos skewering Joe Biden's shape-shifting stance on fracking, China, and NAFTA. The clips also feature an unlikely hero, Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. At a rally in Lititz, Pennsylvania on Monday, the president called Sanders a tremendous loser who did his campaign some big favors by hammering Biden's record during the Democratic primary. You don't have to take my word on his record. Just take a look at this magnificent tape that we made for you. I'm supporting NAFTA because I think it is a positive thing to do, and I do not pretend to be an expert on international trade matters, he said, to boos from the crowd. In another, the former Veep said, "The idea that China is going to eat our lunch is bizarre. The idea that they're a competition, they're going to beat us, is bizarre." The Trump campaign also showed videos of CNN Jake Tapper and Sanders grilling Biden on NAFTA, which Sanders said had resulted in the loss of 160,000 jobs. At a rally in the Villages, Florida on Friday, the crowd cheered for Sanders as they watched another clip of Sanders hammering Biden in a heated row on Social Security during their final primary debate. Okay, here we go. This is from the Gateway pundit, Joe Hoft. Yesterday, we reported on former Veep Joe Biden, who snapped at a reporter who dared to ask him about his son, Hunter. But Veep Biden can't get out of this one. Biden did not let WYOU reporter Andy Mahalchik get through his question before snapping during an event on Saturday. Questions and controversy continue today about Hunter Biden, your son. He began. Biden jumped in. There is no controversy about my son. That's a hell of a lie. That's a flat lie because the president has nothing to run on. It's classic Trump. Biden does not want you to believe your own eyes. Of course, Biden is the one who is lying, as leaked emails have revealed deep levels of corruption and homemade porn of his son smoking crack with prostitutes is all over the internet. But today we have more, much more. Hunter Biden sent the following text to a family friend where he shares that someone is accusing him of being sexually inappropriate around her daughter. This is why Hunter claims he is not allowed to be alone with that person. In another text message from Hunter to a family friend, Hunter shares that his mother, Jill Biden, propagates the claims that Hunter is sexually appropriate around the children and that Veep Joe Biden is aware as well. In a text message sent to Hunter Biden from his Uncle Jim Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden's brother, Uncle Jim shares that both he and Joe are upset with accusations of impropriety, but they don't believe them. Jim and Joe Biden want to discuss with Hunter so they can all get their stories straight. In an email to colleague and fellow board member on Burisma, the now felon Devin Archer, Hunter explains how he was not allowed to be around a certain person without his father, Joe Biden, being there. And the fifth text message shows Hunter explaining to a certain person that her mom told former VP Joe Biden that she would call the police if Hunter tried to see that person. These texts paint a horrible picture of what is going on behind the scenes in the Biden family. What the hell was going on in the Biden household? If a minor was involved, why did no one contact the police? Why was this hidden from the public? Was this because it would tarnish Joe's political image? Most important, is the child safe now? And it just gets worse. It just gets worse and worse and worse. That we have these stories now about Joe Biden supposedly taking inappropriate showers with a daughter. And when does this happen? A man showers with his daughter? No. Yeah, and it goes on and on and on. This is, I don't think that I've got to the worst of it yet. The National File has been all over these stories. Exclusive source, Biden daughter's diary details not appropriate showers with Joe as child. This is from Patrick Howley. National File has obtained what a whistleblower has identified as a copy of the complete diary of Ashley Blazer Biden. Yeah, I wonder who named that child. I'm going to say it's Dr. Jill. Oh, yes, I've come up with a name for our daughter. Joe, what is it? Ashley Blazer. Ashley Blazer? No, that's not going to happen. That sounds made up. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds like a clothing line. Anyway, she is the 39-year-old daughter of Joe Biden. National File also knows the reported precise location of the physical diary and has been told by a whistleblower that there exists an audio recording of Ashley Biden admitting that it is her diary. In the diary, which our source says belongs to the former Veep's daughter, the author writes of her struggle with drug abuse. Ashley Biden's struggle with drugs was widely publicized in 2009. According to our source, the diary also details Ashley Biden's unhealthy relationship with sex and the probably not appropriate showers she shared as a young girl with her father, Joe Biden. After declaring she was, quote, here for sexual trauma, unquote, in the previous entry on page 23 of the diary dated January 30th, 2019, the author explores the topic of sexual abuse and how it may have led to her overactive sex drive. I've had one of my hardest days. My sex drive is effing out of control. Like literally, I am in heat, wrote the author. I know it's not the healthiest way to deal with things, but at least it's better than drugs, she wrote, adding that she thought that she needed sex to feel good. And there's reproductions here of many of these pages in the story. On page 83, in a diary entry dated July the 22nd, 2019, the author wrote that she received a phone call from her father, Joe Biden, according to our source, who cried on the phone while expressing his worry for her in the days leading up to the July 30th to 31 Democratic primary debate. My dad cried on the phone saying he has the debate in a week and now he has to worry about her. And he cried. Maybe he knows what he is doing and it's worked, but my feelings of guilt are often overwhelming. In at least two entries, the author explicitly identifies herself as Ashley Blazer Biden. National File obtained this document from a whistleblower who was concerned the media organization that employs him would not publish this story in the final 10 days before the election. The The whistleblower also has a recording of Ashley Biden admitting the diary is hers and employed a handwriting expert who verified the pages were all written by Ashley. National FI has in its possession a recording of this whistleblower detailing the work his media outlet did in preparation of releasing these documents. In the recording, the whistleblower explains that the media organizations he works for chose not to release the documents after receiving pressure from a competing media organization. And, let's see, this is also from National File, from Tom Pappert today. Biden's daughter thought Hunter's $2.5 million Hollywood mansion would be scandalous. In an entry dated February 4th, 2019, the author wrote, Hunter's birthday. Hunter Biden turned 49 years old on that date. The author then explains that Hunter actually texted me the first time last night to tell me he's glad I had a good day, and reveals that she will soon attend a therapy session with him. I have a therapy session with him tomorrow, which makes me nervous, she wrote. At this point, the author wrote that Hunter was preparing to buy a house, something she later wrote would complicate their father's presidential campaign. There's also an incredible story, and supposedly a picture of a credit card, which is supposed to validate this, that Hunter Biden was having sex with Barack Obama's daughter, Malia. I know it sounds preposterous, and I'm not saying that I believe it. I'm just saying that when you're dealing with people like Hunter Biden, it gets to the point where you think that anything is possible. And it seems to me that if voters think that in your family anything is possible, you're in serious trouble. Story from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. Oh, we also learned today that in Spain, they're saying there's going to be a lockdown until May of 2021. Is there going to be a Spanish economy still existing by May of 2021? A top doctor who served as an expert witness for the U.S. Congress says that even after a COVID-19 vaccine is available, mask wearing and other social distancing measures will remain mandatory. I feel like there is this perception that once we have a coronavirus vaccine, life will go back to normal, wrote Dr. Krutika Kapali. Life will not be like it was pre-COVID. Even after we have a vaccine, you will still need to use good hand hygiene, maintain physical distance, avoid crowds, and wear masks. Well, what's the point of the vaccine then? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Because it was not that long ago that politicians, including Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, said that, we're not going to get back to normal or anything close to it until there's a vaccine. Got to get that vaccine. But now the lockdown terror, it's not going to end. Even with a vaccine, these vaccines are being rushed out very foolishly, in my view. We've already been told by people like Bill Gates and the like that these vaccines might be no more than 50 to 60% effective. I'm talking about a totalitarian regime that is never going to end. Because, what about the flu? People die of the flu in large numbers every year, so why not wear masks all the time for that as well? This is from Lockdown Skeptics by Toby Young, and he has an essay, The Top 10 COVID Failures. There was a terrific piece on Spectator's Coffee House blog yesterday by Carl Hennigan and Tom Jefferson, listing the 10 worst COVID data failures. Here are the first three. 1, overstating of the number of people who are going to die. Excuse me, just a second here. This starts with the now infamous Imperial College London Report 9 that modeled 500,000 deaths if no action was taken at all, and 250,000 deaths if restrictions were not tightened. This set the train of lockdown restrictions in motion. Some argue that Imperial's modeling may have come true if not been for lockdown, but this does not explain Sweden. Academics there said its assumptions would meet 85,000 deaths if Sweden did not lock down. It did not, and deaths are just under 6,000. Leaked SAGE papers. Next came a print paper written by SAGE members to support a 2-week circuit breaker leaked to the press. The reports were striking. With no social distancing measures in place from now until January, the virus could potentially spiral out of control and kill 217,000 people, hospitalize 316,000, and infect 20.7 million. But with a strict 2-week lockdown, the number of deaths could be reduced by 100,000, admission by 139,000, and infections by 6 million. Understandably, this made headlines. But when the lead author was interviewed by the BBC, he said he wished he hadn't put these numbers in the study because it was an extreme scenario included only for illustration. Number 3, miscategorization of COVID death. Under the original system, someone run over by a bus would be counted as a COVID death, or if he or she had tested positive for COVID but later recovered. When this anomaly was pointed out by the Oxford Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine, it turned out even the health secretary was unaware what the COVID death data referred to. He ordered an immediate inquiry. This illustrates how poor quality data from Public Health England was misleading the government itself. A new system was eventually set up, counting deaths within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. This removed over 4,000 deaths from the July 15th death count. Maybe there'll be a inquiry into the COVID fiasco in England. But if it's anything like the inquiry into the rape of children, maybe it'll go on for 5 years and cost what, 123 million pounds. And we're not going to look at any of the embarrassing stuff, okay? Now, because we wouldn't do that. We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And here are the other 6 briefly. Number 4, overstating the effect of lockdown on reducing virus transmission. 5, exaggerating COVID's impact on hospitals. 6, exaggerated fears about lifting lockdown. 7, the valence graph, which the only graph he showed was one where cases doubled every 7 days. And number 8, the Excel spreadsheet blunder. This was blamed on a COVID testing glitch that led to 16,000 missed cases and up to 50,000 untraced contacts who should have otherwise been self-isolating. 9, reluctance to acknowledge uncertainties in evidence. And 10, lack of access and transparency in data. These countries can't go on for much longer if they continue these lockdowns. And to me, there's a serious question whether the people in England are going to rebel against this, perhaps using, extrajudicial means. James Delingpole, long associated with The Spectator, writes on why he refuses to wear a mask, even though it means he ends up getting into endless fights with the COVID marshal types who think it's their moral duty to enforce the rules. It's rude to stare, most of us were told as kids. Just how rude you only realize when you're sitting in a near-empty train carriage minding your own business, when a man in a face mask gets on, takes his seat, swivels in your direction, and fixes you with a long, long, cold, hard death look. Culturally, we're also unused to this kind of behavior. It comes as quite a shock to be on the receiving end. It's also a bit confusing, like being subjected to physical assault, but only in the form of mime. That's why my immediate response was to mime back disbelievingly, mouthing and gesticulating the message, "Are you staring at me?" "Yes, I am staring at you. You're not wearing a mask. Everyone else is wearing a mask, but not you. Why aren't you wearing a mask?" "I don't want to wear a mask either, but I'm wearing a mask because we were told to," he shouted, or rather mumble yelled from beneath his mouth muffler. So you remember I was talking a few minutes ago about the repeated insults from the Black Lives Matter people. "Are you a racist? Are you racist? Are you racist? Are your children racist? Are your children racist? Why are you so uncomfortable? Why are you so uncomfortable?" This is what we have to look forward to in the future. It's insupportable. Let's look at Alex Berenson. The U.S. murder surge is accelerating. Killings are now up 42% in Atlanta, 41% in Philly, 38% in Oakland, 30% in Miami, 25% in LA, 20% in Dallas. Worse cities that had been okay are joining the trend. Dallas has had 27 murders in October compared to 2 in the same period in 2019. The US has never had a recorded murder increase like this. Something is very wrong on the streets. Theories. Cops feel unsupported and have pulled back. Progressive prosecutors, bail reform mean no one is jailed early in crime sprees or fears carrying weapons. 3, masks and COVID panic reduce foot traffic and mean that the streets feel less safe. Remote learning means vulnerable older teens aren't even pretending to go to school. They have more time to fight. I'll throw in sky-high cannabis use since you know that's my thing. 4, this hasn't become a national issue politically since the media is pretending it doesn't exist. I know, shock. But if you are a lefty justice reform type, you need to stop hiding from this and start asking why, because you are killing the people you claim to be helping. But of course, it's all white people's fault anyway. It's a piece in Foreign Policy magazine by Michael Hirsch, which is quite an eye-opener. Economists on the run, Paul Krugman and other mainstream trade experts are now admitting that they were wrong about globalization. It hurt American workers far more than they thought it would. Now, they didn't know that this was going to happen. Really? Yeah, let's farm out the work. If you got the lowest wages and you have no environmental regulations or any kind of regulations, who do you think is going to get that business? You think maybe China is going to get that business and not the United States or Canada? In a series of books and articles beginning in the 1990s, Paul Krugman, a Nobel Prize winner, branded just about everybody who questioned the rapid pace of globalization a fool who didn't understand economics very well. Silly was a word Krugman used a lot to describe pundits who raised fears of economic competition from other nations, especially China. Don't worry about it, he said. Free trade will have only minor impact on your prosperity. Now, Krugman has come out and admitted offhandedly that his own understanding of economics has been seriously deficient as well. In a recent essay titled What Economists, including me, got wrong about globalization, adapted from a forthcoming book on inequality, Krugman writes that he and other mainstream economists missed a crucial part of the story in failing to realize that globalization would lead to hyper-globalization and huge economic and social upheaval, particularly in the industrial middle class in America. And many of these working class communities have been hit hard by Chinese competition, which economists made a major mistake in underestimating, Krugman says. It was quite a whoops moment, considering all the ruined American communities and displaced millions of workers we've seen in the interim, and a newly humbled Krugman must consider an even more disturbing idea. Did he and other mainstream economists help put a protectionist populist, Donald Trump, in the White House with a lot of bad advice about free markets? Well, why is a protectionist populist in the White House a bad thing? Because, to give one example, if Joe Biden is elected on November 3rd, there will be a reset. Everything goes back to normal. America can be hollowed out again. And these people without jobs, they can die of opiates because they're certainly not wanted in their own country. Yeah, China can get rich and powerful and corrupt the rest of the world because it's efficiency, people. Let's talk about some more stupidity, this time in the arts. But I'm going to go back to the chat first. Dawn from Beyond says, well, out shopping, it is a bolt of pure joy when I see another unmasked person. I often strike up a conversation. And so I've been making honest to goodness in real life friends in my area. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Head McNeck says, I think the lockdowns are partially a tool for the elite to smash the global rise of populism, like a man watching his computer succumb to malware. No option but to pull the plug and pray. That's it's assuming that people are going to put up with this for much longer. Oh, the polls say majority of people. The polls do not measure passion. Use my favorite example, the American Revolution. Only 20% of the colonists supported the revolt. against the king, and only 20% of that 20%, that is to say 4% of Americans, were willing to use violence. And who won that? Tricky Woo says they're going to push the vaccinations along with other bullshit, and Trump will stop the mandatory jab in the last minute, only to leave the real Orwellian stuff to be passed. Hickman Warrior says, or just saying "nyet, nyet, nyet" repeatedly in an angry tone. Oh, yes. Jay Smith says, oh, so Krugman forgot the hyper prefix. That's all. Makes sense. Max Vitriol says, remember the days when Conservatism Inc. Yes, they said that Krugman was right about, was the only thing he was right about was free trade. Conservatives are not free traders by nature for all sorts of reasons, which should be obvious. But these people are not conservatives, which is why, once again, don't call yourself that, because people are going to misunderstand what you stand for, first of all, and second, because conservatives are losers. Donald Trump is not a conservative. He won in 2016 because he did not run as a conservative. He didn't run on this family values nonsense that the conservatives were embarrassing themselves for so many years. Because if you set yourself up as a paragon of morality, you have to be exceedingly careful about your personal behavior. Ashley is Joe Daughter's, not Hunter's niece. Yeah, it gets confusing. He was talking about her during the debate, talking about her insights, because she has a master of social work disease. Secret Service scuttlebutt is that Joe walks around au natural. I can see it. He seems like that kind of a guy. You know, he really seems like that kind of guy. It's natural, baby. This guy, the 1960s, it was a glorious, glorious decade for him. You know, as far as he's concerned, they have never ended. Jill looks like Alice Cooper. The hairstyle is very much the same. It is, actually. Okay, yeah, let's get back to academic stupidity. I was alerted, well, this appeared several places on the internet, including on Steve Saylor's site. And in 2020, because there's an anniversary coming up, right? What, 250th anniversary of his birth? Beethoven has become particularly controversial. Did you have that on your 2020 bingo card? Someone called Chris White writes in Slate, Beethoven has a first name. Okay, I knew that. And I knew what it was, too. And who is Chris White when he is at home? Well, according to his Twitter feed does not give any information. Well, he's a music professor, not a tenured one, at UMass Amherst, I believe. Full naming. Yeah, get used to hearing that. There will be a time when we'll go to concerts again. Maybe. We will buy our tickets, shuffle shoulder to shoulder down the aisle, this is in Slate, and find our seats. The lights will dim, and the conductor will walk onto the stage to introduce the program. They might talk about Beethoven, Schumann, and Bartok, and they might talk about Alma Mahler. I don't think so. Florence Price, Henry Burley, and Carolyn Shaw. Many of us, used to the conventions of classical performance, will hardly notice the difference. Traditional white male composers being introduced with only surnames, full names for everyone else, especially women and composers of color. The habitual two-tiered way we talk about classical composers is ubiquitous. For instance, coverage of an early October live stream by the Louisville Orchestra plays the ensemble's performance of a Beethoven symphony and the debut of a composition memorializing Breonna Taylor by Devonne Teens and Iji Dudone. But ubiquity doesn't make something right. It's time we paid attention to the inequity, oh, that word again, inherent in how we talk about composers, and it's time for the divided naming convention to change. The past several decades have seen the world of American classical music reckoning with its racist and sexist history. Oh, put a sock in it, as it has with many other areas of culture. Again, Black people don't seem to like classical music very much. They don't seem to like the listening to it very much. They don't seem to like playing it very much. That's their decision. It's up to them. They want to listen to other kinds of music. Okay, no problem with that. But no, when it has to be representative, everything has to be represented, or even more so. The process has greatly accelerated over the past year. Yes, a bunch of homosexual music critics in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and elsewhere have been beating up on white classical composers like the proverbial red-headed stepchild. Oh, an explosive focus on the inherent white supremacy, urge to kill rising, and male centrism within academic music research. This explosion was sparked by a lecture and ensuing article by Philip Ewell, published in September, in which he calls out mainstream American music theory for its institutional racism, this flashpoint. Like, anyone gives a toss about this? It was preceded by work in similar veins by scholars like Elie Hissama and Robin Attas, and subsequently brought into mainstream musical conversations by YouTuber Adam Neely, and New Yorker writer Alex Ross, one of the aforementioned homosexuals. College-level music pedagogy has responded by dramatically reconsidering which composers and musical traditions we do and don't discuss in the classroom. The world of music theory has seen working groups designed to analyze and advocate for the musical composers with marginalized identities. They were marginalized, were they? People not being very popular, people not liking what you're doing, thinking you're not particularly vital and important. That's not exactly the same thing as being marginalized. Accompanied by online resources of musical examples by these composers. If you're a music teacher who's been demonstrating some concept with a piece by Ludwig van Beethoven or Wolfgang Mozart, these resources will guide you to an alternative piece of music by, say, Elizabeth Cotten, the guitarist responsible for the cotton-picking performance style. Similar dynamics are increasingly evident within other musical fields, including music performance. The Metropolitan Opera, upon canceling its 2020-21 season, also announced it would begin its next season with Terence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones, the first opera by a Black composer to appear on the Met's stage. Yeah. Were they keeping Black composers out because they were Black? Yeah, I don't think so. I suppose if Black opera composers were writing, they were as good as, say, Rossini, I don't think there'd be any problem. But no. And yeah, I got a pretty good idea what this thing is about. Fire shut up in my bones. I suspect it's some sort of whale. Encouraging as it is, this trend is butting headlong into the Western European musical canon for a lot of intersecting music critics, academics, consumers, and performers in the mid-19th through early 20th centuries thought about music history as the story of a few great men producing great works of art. Of course, this tactic is very common in how we tell our histories in many domains. Look, if you read, say, about the 20th century, there were a whole bunch of composers like Rubinstein, for example. Rubinstein was exceedingly popular, not so popular now. Composers who are exceedingly popular now, as Haydn, weren't so popular in the 19th century. Baroque music barely got a look in the 19th century. Now it seems like every opera by Handel, and he wrote dozens, has been recorded and performed. And Vivaldi has been at the top of the charts now for decades. The first million-selling classical recording was the Four Seasons, the Academy of St. Martin's in the Fields. But at the time, who would want to listen to Vivaldi? People are popular, and sometimes they get to be not so popular. There's a tremendous interest now in the music of Bach's sons, Johann Christian Bach and Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. I suppose if you went back to like 1970 or so, I don't know whether you'd find 10 recordings total of both of them put together. Okay, but here we get to the humor here. Here we get to the humor. Here we get to the pause. Tied up in the respect and ubiquity afforded to these men is the mononym, or a single word sufficing for a person's whole name. These canonized demigods have become so ensconced in elite musical society's collective consciousness that only one word was needed to evoke their awesome specter. Mouthfuls of full names became truncated to terse sets of universally recognized syllables. Mozart, Beethoven, Bach. Yeah, again, since there are many Bachs who composed, and two of his sons, the firstborn and the lastborn, became quite popular in their own day and experienced considerable revivals, it is quite common to refer to Johann Sebastian Bach, not as Bach, but as J.S. Bach, in order to distinguish him from his relatives. On the other hand, then, initiatives toward diversity and inclusion are placing new names on concert programs, syllabi, and research papers, names that might not have been there 10 or 20 years ago, or even last year. But these names are appearing next to those that have been drilled deep into our brains by the forces of the inherited canon. This collision between increasing diversity and the mononyms of music history has created a hierarchical system that, whether or not you find it useful, can now only be seen as outdated and harmful. This whole piece reads like a troll. Seriously. As we usher wider arrays of composers into our concerts and classrooms, this dual approach only exacerbates the exclusionary practices that suppressed non-white and non-male composers in the first place. When we say tonight, you'll be hearing symphonies by Brahms and Edmund Dede, I don't think you're going to hear that very often. We're linguistically treating the former as being on a different plane than the latter, a difference originally created by centuries of systematic prejudice, exclusion, sexism, and racism. Dede was a freeborn Creole composer whose music packed concert halls in Europe and America in the mid-19th century. No, it didn't. Look, this is fairly obvious. Brahms. Not very many people named Brahms. Okay, so when we refer to a composer called Brahms, one name, Bizet. Are there a lot of people named Bizet? Well, if we refer to a composer named Bizet, when you're talking about Georges Bizet. There are many people in the music business named Strauss. It was Johann Strauss, father and son, Vater und Sohn. There were others, several others, waltz composers, and then, of course, a completely unrelated man, tone poems, operas, Richard Strauss. So I guess, you refer to Richard Strauss and not just Strauss, and it's even more complicated with Johann Strauss because there was a father and son with the same names. There's nothing sinister in this at all. To be sure, the idea of full naming is not entirely new. Scholarship and pedagogy concerning women composers, especially those married to other composers, Clara Schumann and Alma Mahler, again with the Alma Mahler, have called out the unsavory practice of reserving the mononymic surname for the husband while referring to the equally, if not more accomplished wife. So Alma Mahler is equally, if not more accomplished than her husband. As what? As a conductor? As a composer? No, that's not even close. Not even close to being true. Musicians, academics, and teachers have a lot of work ahead to confront the racist and sexist history of classical music. Full naming composers, especially those who have been elevated to mononymic status by this complicated history, will challenge us to, at the very least, afford the same respect to all of the individuals whose music we talk and write about. I'm not going to give as much respect to Edward Lalo, say, as I'm going to give to Mozart or Haydn or Sibelius, because he was a minor composer. And he was white. So I guess it's not just, women and non-whites who are seen as minor composers. Plenty of minor white composers, and they might have, one or two pieces that people know. But, in terms of their hits, not all that many. He concludes, when we do return to the concert halls, let's return to concerts that play Ludwig Beethoven alongside Florence Price and Edmond Dede alongside Johannes Brahms. Ludwig van Beethoven. Yeah, that's his full name. So this fellow, Christopher White, he describes himself on Twitter as Chris Boofer White. You get it? Because Halloween is coming up. He wrote on Twitter on October 24th, y'all, I'm actually getting hate mail about my Slate essay. Golly, I can't imagine why. It makes me appreciate the calluses progressive activists must have to wear on a daily basis. If people are this incensed about composers' first names, no, I think we're actually more incensed by pandering and stupidity. I can't imagine what people who advocate for healthcare, immigrant rights, trans rights, BLM, prison reform, etc. must go through. So I did a little research on this Chris White fellow. And of course, he has several pieces on Slate, including an amusing one, Listening for Gayness in the Soundscapes of Provincetown. And I thought, yeah, a definite feeling about this guy. Oh, let's talk about Lady Gaga, because gay men are in no way a cliche. No, of course they're not a cliche. Edge of Glory is gay music, but plenty of straight people love that song. I pause and think a moment. It's always been so obvious to me that something essential about this song seems to be oriented toward my gay identity. And it's not the words nor the singer's sexuality. Lady Gaga's personal bisexuality, which doesn't exist, seems beside the point. Rather, it's in how the music sounds, how it's built and composed, but my friend's obliviousness is indicative of another layer. The musical gayness that is so obvious to me is invisible to him. I wonder whether there are reliable characteristics of music that can make a song obviously appeal to my particular sexual expression while still passing for mainstream music. What makes music sound gay to me? And then he describes Provincetown, Massachusetts, which sounds like a gigantic gay petri dish. But I found a piece that he had posted on HuffPost, and it is, let's bring it all back to Trump, because it's all tied together, right? And this is called A Letter to My Students, 3 a.m., Election Day, 2016. You see where this is going, right? It's election night. I wake at 3 o'clock and I'm watching her lose. I am a professor of music theory at a university in Massachusetts, a deep blue state. And I have no qualms that what I teach is far less practical than any of the topics being discussed on any channel that is still broadcasting at this hour. But I will be at school tomorrow. I will not cancel class. My eyes will be bloodshot and I won't have slept more than a few hours. And even though we will be studying what can only seem trivial compared to the enormous tectonic plates of politics, it's important. Even though holding a couple of music classes isn't going to impact any aspect of this election, it's important. It's impossibly important. If this Chris White fellow believes that music theory is so unimportant, why does he teach it? Why is music theory less important than the media covering politics? Richard Strauss was attacked for the nature of the operas that he wrote during the Second World War. What, you're writing about an opera on the subject of the nature of art? I saw some English critics say This was the wrong time to have written that. And my reaction was, no, it was exactly the right time to have written it. Anyway, Chris White continues, regardless of your politics, this vote is staggering. No matter how you voted, it is not exaggerating to say that these results as they stand are simply staggering. I'm not making this up. I'm reading this verbatim. Given the electoral counts right now, a man who wanted to impose a religious test on citizenship is likely to be our next president. A man who loses his temper on Twitter is likely to have our nuclear codes. A man who belittles and insults women is poised to become the most powerful person in the world. I'm not saying that this is the right or wrong decision. He could potentially be a great president, an admired world leader, an iconoclastic jolt to our ossified bureaucracy. But given the way this election has run, I'm merely saying these results are momentous. I will hold class tomorrow because I respect you all too much not to. I can't call out sick when I think of my strong, smart, motivated, and ambitious female students and how it must feel to move through a world where you all have a president who has produced a myriad of sound bites, enough to fill many news cycles berating women. It would be so easy to stay in bed tomorrow morning, and I would understand and support if you needed to do that. But if you wake up and don't want to concede another victory to what you might view as the voices of bigotry and chauvinism, I will be there in the classroom to support you. If that's your viewpoint, you can wake up knowing that they've won an electoral victory, but that you can't harm your commitment to your future or to your ambitions or to your self-respect. Now, here it comes. Here it comes. The words in passing, the obiter dicta. I will hold class tomorrow because I am a gay man who grew up closeted in a society that stigmatized my identity. I will hold class tomorrow because I was married to the love of my life after the landmark Supreme Court decision 2 years ago. I will hold class tomorrow because I might wake up to a government-elect that is committed to repealing all my rights my husband and I have won over the last decade, if not more. These are the kind of people teach in university now, who teach music theory in universities now. But thank you for that, Chris White. It was most amusing. Okay, let's talk about an idiot. Let's talk about a privileged idiot. This is from the Mail. Prince Harry says his education and upbringing meant he didn't know unconscious bias existed until he walked a day in Meghan's shoes as he interviews BLM campaigner who rescued white counter-protester. The Duke of Sussex spoke about racism in an interview with activist Patrick Hutchinson for GQ magazine. 36-year-old Harry admitted his upbringing and education did not equip him to understand the issue. He said, living a day or a week in my wife's shoes following marriage to Meghan Mertz helped him. I'm sorry. We're supposed to believe that you, Ginger Waster, you have enough empathy to actually be able to live a day or week in your wife's shoes, who is a black or half black American woman with no title. Harry's been carrying on for the last few weeks or months that, oh, this was all a big shock to me. You were a prince, literally a prince, a royal family. And then later you became a duke. Oh, well, I had no idea how isolated I was from the world. But I don't know. I sometimes think Prince Harry is one of the stupidest men alive. And then I think, nah, he couldn't be that stupid. He's a prince, right? He knows that he's different from other people on doing things wrong in life. Everyone gets themselves into trouble at some point. It's how you learn from it. On Ashley Banjo and Diversity, I'm not making that name up, by the way. You start to think, well, how many people actually watch the performance that have complained, or they just had their opinion inflamed by what they've read? On Black Lives Matter's demonstrations, the actual fundamental purpose of the protest was, and still remains, an incredibly important global movement. That's just a word salad. That's not a sentence. It doesn't mean anything. on unconscious bias, once you realize or you feel a little bit uncomfortable, then the onus is on you to go out and educate yourself, because ignorance is no longer an excuse. Yeah, okay. Enough of them. Oh, this is a continuing series. Newspaper headlines that would have made no sense 5 years ago, or even perhaps last year. Iggy Azalea announces split from boyfriend Playboy Carti and confirms she will raise their son, Onyx, as a single mother. When I become dictator, women who give their children, particularly boys, names like Onyx, will be imprisoned pour encourager les autres. Iggy Azalea. Uncanny Valley. Okay. This is an unpleasant subject, but here we are. From Forbes magazine, reaction to Tampax tweet highlights transphobia. This is by Kim Elsener, a senior contributor. I cover the intersection of business, psychology, and gender. A month after Tampax, owned by Procter & Gamble, posted a tweet in support of transgender individuals, that's not exactly what it did, but never mind. Feedback is still pouring in. While some are praising the inclusivity of the message, others say it erases women. Some are even suggesting a boycott of Tampax products. Keep in mind that Procter & Gamble owns Gillette, and Gillette decided, 2 years ago, to go after the people who buy their razors, the men who buy their razors, by basically calling them creeps, toxic masculinity, and the like. My favorite bit, if you've seen the commercial, is some, how shall I put it, gorgeous young woman with a great figure comes walking down the sidewalk, and there's this young black guy, handsome guy, right? And he's leaning against the wall, and he's about to, walk up to her and talk to her. And the black guy, he puts his arm in front of her. No, stupid white people. And I'm thinking, in that situation, who is more likely to approach this woman? A black man or a white man? I think we know the answer to all that. The tweet posted by Tampax read, fact, not all women have periods. Yeah, I knew that. Also a fact, not all people with periods are women. No, that's a lie. That's an outrageous lie. Let's celebrate the diversity of all people who bleed. Hashtag myth busting. Hashtag period truths. Hashtag trans is beautiful. Curiously, there are 5 people sexually indeterminate shown in this illustration's crude cartoons. None of them are white, strangely. While many comments seem to be in support of the inclusive nature of the Tampax tweet, not everybody is happy with the message. It's clear that transphobia is still alive as well. Transphobia, or the fear, hatred, disbelief, and mistrust of people who are transgender, results in staggering statistics of depression and suicide among the transgender population. Well, whose fault is that? Actually, because it wasn't all that long ago that anyone who had suggested such a course would have been warned against it, in apocalyptic tones. But now it's so beautiful, it's so ennobling, and yet these people kill themselves at a very high rate after they've gone through it, which suggests that it is not, in fact, good for them. On Saturday, in reaction to the Tampax tweet, British actor Lawrence Fox tweeted, I'm genuinely interested to know who at Tampax thought it might be a good idea to gamble your entire client base, biological women, against this anti-factual and anti-woman virtue vomit. Others, mostly cisgender women, agreed with Fox and vowed to no longer use Tampax products. Tampax was clearly trying to do what we've been asking all our large corporations to do, be more inclusive. What do you mean by we, Kimosabe? Still, some women perceive that including trans means erasing the identities of cisgender women. Earlier this year, Harry Potter series author J.K. Rowling tweeted in response to an article which referred to the menstrual health and hygiene needs of girls, women, and all people who menstruate. She tweeted, "Women who menstruate. I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Wumban, wimpund, wumud." After facing criticism for suggesting that transgender women are not women, Rowling followed up, "If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased." It's kind of shocking that someone can actually say something as simple and true as this anymore. Of course, it helps if you're worth $1 billion. Why would feminists choose to pick on another oppressed group? Who is being oppressed here? Who is beaten up here? It's the TERFs who are being threatened and beaten up. Their arguments vary, and the logic is often difficult to follow. Journalist Laurie Penny, who is truly one of the stupidest women in the world, summed up, they believe that if anyone can become a woman, then the word woman means nothing, and therefore apparently trans people are out to destroy the entire concept of womanhood by their very existence. Yes, just so. The author at Forbes says, like I said, the logic is wanting. Okay. I take a look at the chat here. Oh, I'm turning puce here because the sun has almost disappeared. Daylight. We're going to switch back to standard time soon. I don't know. I guess I'm going to have to work with the lighting here. Jill handles Joe like she is his mother, says YT. You've seen the footage of him on stage sucking her fingers? Okay. Say a cheer for ACB. Indeed. Joken 666, Puce Lives Matter. Jonathan Ferguson says homeschool kids and don't let them consume popular culture or be prepared to lose them. Buddy says, I'm still trying to figure out how to raise kids in this environment. I think you have to make decisions which are unpopular, which are going to be unpopular with your peers and quite probably unpopular with your children as well. I mean, if every 6-year-old has a smartphone now and you're not going to allow your child to have a smartphone, it's going to lead to some resentment. But then there are people going to say, oh, they're just going to use someone else's smartphone. Yeah, I suppose that's a possibility, But, I mean, these children aren't being raised in Skinner boxes. Weaponized everything, says Tricky Woo. Metatron says, Gillette's new ad campaign reads, use our razor to cut your own throat. I don't know. If you remember that Gillette ad, there was a barbecue, and there was a comically long line of barbecues. I don't know, like about a dozen of them, right? And they showed 2 kids wrestling on the grass. It wasn't like one of the kids was beating the hell out of the other one. They were wrestling, Oh, no, we can't have this. And some, new age dad, no, this is not how we act. Brent Studemeyer says, and what the hell is wrong with approaching a beautiful woman anyways, Gillette? Yeah, well, that was the point that Professor Tosspot made on Smack Talk. What do you think that this, you see a man and he goes up to talk to a woman on a well-populated sidewalk? What is he? Was he going to knock her down? Is he going to rape her? Is he going to drag her by the hair back to his cave? No. Maybe he's looking for love. Maybe they'll get married. Could be a happy ending there. It's always possible. Alrighty, that is the show for today. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And if you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. On Theater Thursday, October 29th, 2 days before Halloween, I'm going to talk about one of the greatest horror films ever made. It's from Robert Wise, 1963, and it is called The Haunting. And on the book club, I am talking about, again, spirit of the season. I am talking about a very macabre book about the industry and culture of death in the United States, and it is called The Loved One by Evelyn Waugh. So if you'd like to contribute a donation to this show, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send money directly via interac@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I shall leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to form some genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.